Quickly take the slack out of the levers, get the pads onto the discs, and compress the suspension. At this stage, the front tyre will be starting to flatten out. The bike is now ready for hard braking, if necessary. This is what happens if you apply your front brake in a corner. The bike sits up and runs wide. The back brake, the bike squats and pulls into the corner. If you have to make an emergency stop in a corner, this is how you do it. Set up, bike upright, squeeze, full on both brakes, and ease off. At times, you'll have to brake over differing road conditions. Still set the bike up the same, but how hard you squeeze will depend on how well your tyres will grip the road surface. Here's one, bitumen onto gravel. Set up, firm braking on the bitumen, ease off as you come onto the gravel, and reapply gently. Wet conditions. Whether it's a puddle you've ridden through or it's pouring rain, you've got to dry your brakes out by applying them gently until you feel them start to grip. Do it regularly. You have to set up the same way, but you have to do it earlier. Your braking distance will be greater because you shouldn't squeeze the brakes as hard. If you do, you'll lock up. What do you do when you lock up? First, the rear wheel. It will slide out of line. Which way depends on the camber of the road or the lean angle of the bike. Ease off before you get too sideways or you'll lose it. Now for the front brake. Expect an immediate loss of balance and control. As soon as you hear or feel it, release the levers quickly. You can reapply gently. Emergency braking should be practiced until it's second nature. It's called right braking, and it's all part of right riding.
In this segment of the video, we'll look at developing the mental skills to recognize the potential for harm accurately. It will let you know how to avoid getting hurt or hurting someone else. If we're able to recognize risk accurately, we don't need to be told what to do. We avoid the edge of the cliff. We keep away from the danger. It's no different on a bike. Surviving is about keeping away from danger, usually by slowing down or moving away. You already have the bike skills to protect yourself. But you also need the mental skills. The mental skills for recognizing what you should be slowing down or moving away for, and exactly when you should be doing it. If you slow down and move away too early, you might hold up other traffic or confuse other drivers. If you're too late slowing down or moving away, you might not have enough room to avoid crashing. As a guide to safe, smooth riding, you need to be preparing to protect yourself at least 3 seconds before an event. If your mind is on the job and the riding conditions are good, 3 seconds gives you time to react and stop smoothly if you have to, or time to reposition your bike. Let's look at how you can calculate when you are 3 seconds from an event. Select a stationary point in front of you and guess when you think you are 3 seconds away. Then count. 1001, 1002, 1003. If you've passed your selected point before you get to the end of 1003, you need to give yourself more room. Here's the 3 seconds projected in front of the bike at 60 kilometres an hour. We can call this our survival space. When you go faster, the 3 second space gets longer. You need more survival space because it takes longer to stop, and you'll need more room to manoeuvre. When you're slow, the space gets shorter. That's okay. The brakes have less work to do, and you need less room to manoeuvre. For adverse conditions, you'll need at least another second, possibly more. To survive, you need to protect this space. If you don't, you're putting yourself at risk, like this rider. He hasn't responded to the car on the right or the car on the left. If either driver moves off now, the rider will have very little time or space to avoid a crash. Look, slow down or move away. These are the habits you need to develop to avoid harm. We'll watch this rider follow these steps. She'll be looking for anything that could enter her survival space. The first thing will be this car at the intersection. By the time the rider's survival space reaches this car, she should be getting ready to slow down or move away, or maybe both. Let's hear what she's thinking.
All right, now there's a car approaching the side street on the left. No one behind me. I'll set up the brakes, move right to create a survival space.
Let's continue to follow the rider in a busy street. Notice how she looks carefully, scanning all around so she has plenty of time to respond to anything that could enter her survival space.
All right, now I'm checking my mirrors. The lights are green, they could change. There's further pedestrians over on the left, a car with its right indicator on. Caution through the intersection and try and make eye contact with the person in the white Ford.
Now let's look at the rider in a number of different situations.
All right, I'm checking my mirrors. The traffic's a fair way behind me. The lights are green, so I'll continue cautiously. Now, I'm looking at that blue car on the left. Its lane's going to run out, so at this rate he'll merge into my survival space. I'd better drop back and let him in. Right, now he's in front. I'll check my 3 second gap and then continue. All right, now I'm checking my mirrors. There's a car passing on my right. I'm in his blind spot now. He can't see me in his mirror and he could do a lane change. I'll check my mirrors, drop back and be ready.
Let's look at how to deal with a hill crest.
I'm looking at this hill crest coming up. Can't see what's on the other side. The main concern's vehicle's coming the other way. Better move towards the left.
The rider is approaching a left-hander. He's positioned himself to maximise his view around the corner, but he can't see through to the end of it. There could be anything around there, including a car coming the other way. He backs off, changes down, and gets his space back. The rider is approaching a right-hand corner. He's positioning himself for the best view and looking for the end of the curve. He may meet a vehicle coming around the corner, so he keeps away from the middle of the road. He gives himself some room on the left as well. Good riders use a variety of methods to fine-tune their cornering, but protecting their survival space comes first. Now that we've seen a rider look for and respond to potential harm, you have a go. Let's follow this rider. We'll pause each time the rider's safety is threatened. You look for the threat and work out the best response. Try to do this before we pause. Can you see the threat? The vehicle on the left is going to come across and take the rider's lane, moving into his survival space. What does the rider do? Check mirror and ease back. A new threat. The vehicle on the left coming up from the side road may come through. The rider's action? Check mirror, set up brakes, moving slightly toward the centre but not too far as there's an oncoming vehicle, and continue. A lot happening here. A vehicle on the left two pedestrians on the right, and a heavy vehicle coming down the centre with a smaller vehicle hidden behind it. Brakes are set up and the rider moves to the centre, not too far to the left. The threat? A heavy vehicle turning and a vehicle on the right that could come out wide. Also an oncoming vehicle further back. The rider's action is to reposition to the left and continue. A slippery surface, a crash up ahead. People could step out from the broken down vehicle, which may itself move. And the vehicle on the right has cut across into the rider's lane, invading his survival space. The rider checks mirrors, sets up and repositions to the left. A vehicle on the left which may or may not push out. The rider checks mirrors, sets up and positions himself to the right. Looking ahead, there are parked cars in the rider's lane. He'll want to move right, but must be watchful of vehicles coming through. The rider checks mirrors, signals, head checks over his shoulder, and continues on. A school crossing area and work vehicles, one partly blocking the road. It doesn't seem hazardous, but it's possible that school kids or workmen may come out and enter the rider's survival space. The rider checks mirror, sets up brakes and moves toward the centre of the road. He is well prepared to respond to the possible threats. We've learned how to control the bike at very low speeds to avoid harm. Now let's look at the bike control skills you need at higher speeds to avoid harm. There are two main skills you'll need. The skill to stop the bike before a hazard, which is usually the safer option, and the skill for moving around a hazard, which may be your only way out if you fail to anticipate the hazard. We'll look at what you have to do to move around something first. Later we'll see how you can avoid situations like this altogether. Let's say these cones are a hazard, like the car pulling out, and you haven't given yourself room to stop safely. We'll play that again and look at the technique he used. There are two main parts to it, looking and pushing. Look where you want to go and push the handlebar on the side you want to go. Your other hand can pull. When you push the handlebar, this momentarily steers the bike off your intended course, forcing the bike to lean in the direction you want to go. So if you want to go to the right, you look right, push right, and go right. If you want to go to the left, you look left, push left, and go left. Once the swerve has started, relax the push and steer straight. If you want to go to the right and then to the left, you guessed it, push right, push left. Push gently and you'll move away gently. Push quickly and you'll move away quickly, providing you have good tyre grip. On a slippery surface, you wouldn't be able to do this. With practice, you can get quite good. You'll learn to make it a smooth action by pivoting at the hips and keeping your weight on the pegs to assist control. But this is on a training range. It's not quite as easy on the road. This rider was relying as much on luck as skill to avoid a crash. If the car had moved a fraction later, it would have been a different story on the road. Swerving to avoid harm is an option, but not one we can rely on. You should plan to have room to stop. This rider was ready for the turning car and used his brakes well. But what if he hadn't been ready? Chances are he would have frozen up and not braked at all, or grabbed and locked the brakes. These are the most common surprise reactions. This sort of braking would probably have ended in a crash. Before we go to good braking, we'll look at what you should do if you skid. If you lock the front wheel, release the brake immediately. Then reapply the brakes smoothly. If you lock the rear wheel, steer the bike straight if it's out of line, and then release the brake pressure. In any kind of skid, keep both feet up on the foot pegs. This may take a bit of willpower, but it will give you the best control. Once more. Front wheel, release the brake immediately and reapply gently. Rear wheel, bike in line, release the brake and reapply gently. Good riders rarely put themselves in emergency situations. They try to anticipate trouble and they know how to brake well. To understand the best method for braking, let's first look at the effect braking has on a bike. As we brake, the weight of the bike starts to move from both wheels to mostly the front wheel. The harder the bike stops, the more weight transfers to the front. When the weight transfers progressively, it lets the front tyre grip the road more. The tyre has a bigger footprint on the road. At the same time, rear tyre grip is reduced. To stop quickly, you need good grip. Because of this, there's a limit to the amount of work the rear brake can do. In good conditions, the front brake provides nearly all your stopping power. We'll look at a braking demonstration. The rider on the right is only using the back brake. The rider in the middle is using the front brake only, and the rider on the left is using both brakes together. Notice how the rider using the back brake alone takes by far the longest distance to stop. The rider using both brakes together stops in the shortest space. Using both brakes together is clearly the most effective way to stop. Now let's look at the two parts of good braking, set up and squeeze. The first part, setting up, prepares you and the bike for braking. Apply the front brake and back brake levers just until the brakes start to work. This stage takes all the slack out of the braking and suspension systems, and as we've seen, gently delivers more weight onto the front tyre, giving it more grip. Also, your brake light is on, telling the person behind you may be going to stop. Your bike is set up to brake hard. Now comes the second part of good braking, the squeeze. Progressively squeeze the brake levers, gently at first, then gradually harder and harder to stop the bike. The front and rear brakes work powerfully together to slow the bike safely.